Netanyahu's only goal has been to set the region on fire. The entire world should realize this. He's lost the PR war, he's lost the legal war, and he's losing the military war. And his only chances of survival is to drag America into a direct confrontation with Iran. This is a fundamental threat to world peace. Everyone should be hoping for his downfall. I first met Netanyahu as an opposition leader in 2000. At that time, he had just basically one pitch, and that was Iran is the enemy and Hamas and Hezbollah are just its aircraft carriers. So a central leitmotif of Netanyahu's policy, apart from doing everything he can to stop the creation of a Palestinian state, is to get America into an attack on Iran.
For Iran, Israel is first, America is next. So when Israel fights Hamas, we're fighting Iran. When we fight Hezbollah, we're fighting Iran.
A war against Hezbollah is regarded as a matter of when, not if. If Israel has failed in its primary objective to dismantle Hamas after 10 months of unleashing more bombs on Gaza than the Allies dropped on Dresden and Hamburg in the Second World War, how on earth does it think it will unseat or push Hezbollah back? Hezbollah is much better armed than Hamas, with very accurate missiles that can sneak under the Iron Dome system. So the whole of Israel is vulnerable to a regional war on 5 fronts. This is fundamentally against all Western interests, particularly after a series of defeats for Western policy in Iraq, in Yemen, in Syria, in Libya. American foreign policy has basically labored under a huge self-imposed burden. They have been trying to persuade Netanyahu to stop the war, but they provided no incentive for Netanyahu to stop the war. And it still remains a bipartisan policy of whatever happens in the Middle East, however badly Israel has behaved, we are going to support Israel, which not even Ronald Reagan or H.W. Bush, 2 Republican presidents, allowed themselves to work under. If you remember, Reagan stopped Yitzhak Shamir from bombing West Beirut in 1982 because the scenes of the nightly bombing were so grim on CNN that Reagan, as the sort of consummate television frontman, said, "No, I don't want it. Stop it." And he stopped it. He stopped the shelling within 20 minutes. H.W. Bush threatened to cut aid off for every settlement that was announced. So now you've got a president in Joe Biden who is an instinctive Zionist, a generational Zionist, who is given far more leeway to Israel, committing far more barbaric crimes over a much longer period of time, and just giving it the green light. For Biden now to say, stop, 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 is also an incredibly weak position, because he could have said everything he's saying 10 months ago. Nothing has been achieved except the deaths of 40,000 Palestinians, 100,000 wounded, and even that could be a huge underestimate. And it is in US policy's interest to deconflict the Middle East. Their interest is in withdrawal, to confront China in the China Sea. So all of this is absolutely against America's interest. And yet its default position is we've got to protect Israel. Israel has to have the arms it needs. So it is fighting against its own policy. There's no coherence in American foreign policy. The one obstacle to the deal is not the Israeli negotiators, not the Israeli deep state, not even the Israeli army. It's Netanyahu himself, because he fears his government could break up. As soon as the war ends, this king risks being deposed. After 10 long months, we've had some quite threatening and key statements from Netanyahu's point of view. The first was his defense minister, Yoav Gallant, saying that Israel could not achieve its objectives militarily. That's his own defense minister. And now you've got Biden himself and the US saying Hamas can't be defeated militarily. Its tunnel network was much more extensive than they thought. The only way of getting the remaining 115 live hostages out is through negotiation. And he doesn't have any trophies for this war. Mohammed Deif is still alive, according to top Hamas officials, who's directly responsible for the October 7th attack. And he hasn't killed Yahya Sinwar, who is now the new leader of Hamas. Gaza and Hamas and the resistance movement are very, very much alive and still capable of firing missiles at Tel Aviv. after 10 months. The one senior figure in Hamas that Israel has killed is Ismail Haniyeh. Ismail Haniyeh wasn't hiding in any tunnel. He was openly operating in Tehran as a spokesman and as a diplomat for Hamas. And it was the clearest indication that Israel was not interested in real peace talks and negotiations by basically killing the chief negotiator. And they didn't just kill Haniyeh. Before that, they'd killed 60 members of his family, his sons and grandsons. That act basically tore up negotiations and any thought of returning the hostages alive. Because one of the big tensions in Israel is that, incredulously, Netanyahu's policy on the hostages was that it is only because of our military pressure that Hamas will surrender the hostages. It's exactly the opposite way around. The main killer of hostages by far has been the Israeli army bombing itself. Even 3 hostages which were trying to surrender got gunned down by Israeli soldiers. But the only way of getting the remaining hostages back is through peace and through negotiations with Hamas. It basically demonstrates the total folly, stupidity of Netanyahu's thinking, which is all about tactical strikes. It's not about the day after. Firstly, you can't decapitate an organization like Hamas or Hezbollah. So every time you kill one person, 2 or 3 people will step up. It's a proven system that keeps the organization funding. If you take out the leader, you do not take out the organization. So that's mistake number 1. Mistake number 2, it is an open provocation and an escalation. And they know that. So Israel escalates, and then the rest of the world says, oh, no, don't reply to it. And you've got this enormous pressure on Netanyahu himself now from a Western alliance that backed him, but now has basically had enough and wants the whole thing to come to an end tomorrow. And also, most importantly, one of the war aims was to push Palestinians into the sea. If the war has been won by anyone, it's been won by the people of Gaza, not Hamas, but the people of Gaza, saying, yeah, we're going to die here, rather than repeat the mistakes of 1948 or 1967. Netanyahu had a plan to thin out the population of Gaza and tasked his right-hand man, Ron Dermer, with a plan for executing that. And it's clear from the bombing and from the pattern of strikes that the target wasn't Hamas, it was all the people of Gaza. And that was a fundamental strategic error. And it made the war an existential war for all Palestinians everywhere, not just in Gaza, but in the West Bank too. Israel has really damaged itself in this war. It's under huge pressure now, basically just to wave the white flag. Well, I would argue that Netanyahu isn't just a threat to the region, but he's a threat to Israel itself. Before this war, Israel had and has total dominance between the river and the sea, but Netanyahu wanted it all. This is the classic mistake of all colonial powers. Napoleon made it, Hitler made it as well. Both thought that they could crown their military dominance of Western Europe by attacking Russia. And this is a classic case of colonial imperial overreach. The clearest historical precedent to what he is doing in Israel is Algeria under French colonial rule. They were the dominant power, the colons, and they went too far. So in trying to seize all, France lost Algeria in its entirety. And this could be the position of Netanyahu in Israel today.